Well, it looks like we are, in fact, live on the internet, and it is officially spooky season. How do I know this? Because down here in the old basement studio, it's freezing. So that's why I got my thermal undershirt on. I had my heater going, but yeah, but I guess it's appropriate because we got some nice chills going this month. We are kicking off here on Kicking the Seat Scare-a-Thon 2022. Now, Scare-a-Thon has been going on for a little while now, at least about a week, in fact. And every year, Aaron Christensen, AC, as you see him right here in full color, he's been doing Scare-a-thons where every October he watches as many horror movies as he can in order to raise money and awareness for a great cause. In the last few years, AC, how long have we been doing the Friday Night Frights?
I feel like we started these in 2020 because that's when we went on to the YouTubes.
Yeah.
And but we, like you've been helping out with Scare-a-thon for a few years before that as well.
Yeah. I remember us watching Rob Zombie's 31 together. I don't know if that was the first one of these, but it was a while ago. But yeah, so we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and every Friday in October, we are going to be going live at 7:30 p.m. Central to talk about a horror movie and, whatever else happens to pop into our heads. So we are joined, I don't know if I actually plugged your site, AC. It's Horror 101 with Dr. AC. You can catch that link down below. And we're also joined once again by J. Blake Ficarra, esteemed author and now documentary filmmaker.
Hopefully.
Well, we will, this is all about horror and suspense and thrills this month. So we're going to keep you in suspense as we talk a bit about what Blake's got going on towards the end of this hour. We are going to be discussing doing a 35th anniversary roundtable about Joel Schumacher's The Lost Boys. Yes, I heard my arteries harden as well. But before we get into that, AC, why don't you tell us a bit about who we're benefiting this year with Scare-a-thon and the Friday Night Frights?
Yes, we are benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. They provide financial aid for women who are unable to afford abortions and emergency contraceptives. And they have an amazing network of partners that they work with. So if a woman needs financial help in transportation or lodging or just getting from A to B, they have a great network that is able to provide those services, and we're going to be working throughout the month, to continue to raise awareness and funds for that project.
Cool. And I understand you've had some great success with that already, just in week one. So there is a direct link to donate via Plum Fund down in the description below. So if you feel so moved, go ahead. I know, it's a kind of a controversial issue, but we're working with a nonpartisan organization here. So yeah, if you want to support the Scare-a-thon 2022 this year and really help out with, it's a great cause. So you have a habit of picking picking wonderful organizations to partner with, AC. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, I wish it's one of those where being able to lend a hand is important, and this year it felt even more so than usual. So, and I've got the Plum Fund open. So if anybody contributes live during the show, I am happy to shout that out.
All right, cool. Well, you can shout it out just like I'll shout out comments as they come in. And yes, I do want to invite people to comment. We are here live, and we're going to talk about the Lost Boys in a minute, as well as fantastic mullets and maggot rice and any other memories you might want to share from this movie. But and speaking of comments, we're going to kick it off with David Wilt, who says, I read that the Lost Boys was originally going to be a vampire version of the Goonies, and the character of Star was going to be a male character. I knew that it was skewing young initially in the concept, but I didn't know that about Star. Interesting.
Well, and what's interesting is, I didn't know about Star being a male character, but the original vision was that it was going to be a tall, willowy blonde. And I forget who promoted Jamie Gertz as, you need to see this person as well.
Jason Patrick, I think.
Was
He
it?
had
Okay.
worked with her on Solar Babies, and I think they
Right.
did a play together.
So she got the gig instead of being a willowy blonde.
Blake, I just want to call something out. I love the windscreen on your microphone, because when you talk into it, it almost looks like one of those early, like, 1980s, special effects cutouts. I don't know. Yeah, it's just something about the transparency and the hard edge of the frame. That's great. Anyway, so Blake, how you doing? We haven't talked in a while, because you've been up to a million things. But how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing okay. I'm excited to talk about The Lost Boys. I've been extremely busy trying to do all kinds of things, including, make a movie. So Sundays have been rough for me. That's why I haven't been on the Giallo show, but happy to be here tonight.
Awesome. Well, as we kick off each Scare-a-Thon episode, AC, usually I ask you this first, but since we have a guest, I'll ask you, Blake. In all of your goings on, have you had time to watch any scary movies this week? And if so, what have you seen?
So I watched The Lost Boys.
Very good. Very good.
You know what? My mind's a blank. I've been trying to think. I know I watched some recently, but I can't remember which ones. I apologize.
It's okay, because oddly, as I asked you that question, Blake, my mind went blank on what I had actually watched this week. So yeah, it's okay. It's going around. AC, what have you watched? And you're probably up to like movie 66 by now, right?
I've watched a few at this point. I'm trying to post a review a day on the Horror 101 with Dr. AC YouTube channel. And so far I think we're like one day behind. I think we've done 6, but I've got a couple in the proverbial can right now. But what I've actually watched, if not reviewed, has been Antlers, The Black Phone, the new Candyman from 2021, movie called Censor, Ben Wheatley's film In the Earth, James Wan's Malignant, Spiral from the Book of Saw, which Ian and I chatted about today on the show, and a really terrific film called The Vigil, which I liked quite a bit.
And you've worked in sleep somewhere, because I know you have a day job, sir.
That's what November's for.
I remembered some of the movies I've watched recently.
All right.
Okay, came back to me. You put me on the spot before. I got nervous. I watched The Gate.
Oh, fun.
Which is a fun one. Like you said, 87, just like this movie, I think. Prince of Darkness, which might also be 87.
Also 87, yeah.
And Day of the Dead, 85. Those are the ones that I'm recalling at the moment. Hills Have Eyes. I watched that recently.
The original or the
original?
Okay.
I remember liking the remake as well, but I haven't seen that since the theater. But I watched the remake. I mean, the original recently.
I think I recall hating the remake, but I think it was just too effective. Like, it freaked me out. It's like such a nasty piece of work. Not that the original wasn't, but yeah. All right. Well, a lot of movies from the 80s. That's good. And we're going to be talking about a big movie from the 1980s, The Lost Boys.
But wait, Ian, sorry, not to like drive your own show, but do we get to hear some of yours that you've been watching?
I haven't watched. It's been kind of an offbeat week, because I'm kicking off our spooky season with some offbeat choices for genre. I watched Rob Zombie's The Munsters, which I absolutely adored. I didn't like it. I loved it. It's on my list of best films of the year. And that's one of the reasons I'm kind of glad that Brian isn't here, because if you saw what he posted on my Facebook, he said, "I love you, Ian, but no." Let's see. I also watched The Virgin Suicides, which is not immediately thought of as a horror movie, but this weekend I'm going to be on a podcast talking about why I believe it is. And I watched Spiral from the Book of Saw again. And The Lost Boys.
For your sins, you watched Spiral from the Book of Saw.
I did. But so we're going to talk about The Lost Boys finally. Thanks for calling me out on my own show. But okay, so let's talk about this movie. Blake, I think I got to blame you for this because after having finally finished the first volume of Scored to Death, your wonderful book of interviews with genre composers, I've mentioned this to you before. I can't watch movies without being overly conscious of not just the score, but film sound effects and just like sound design. And The Lost Boys was no exception. It's not necessarily score because it's mostly scored by rock music, but this movie feels like it's like 80% of the work is being done by by the music. And that's not a criticism because it's great, but I had forgotten how integral that is to the mood, to driving the narrative forward. It's really quite a feat. Is that something that do you agree? Did you pick up on that when you watched The Lost Boys either for the first time or when revisiting it?
I mean, definitely revisiting it, I've realized that they used what's that opening song, "Cry Little Sister," like 5 times in the movie, which I didn't remember. But yeah, I mean, it's got a great song track, and even when there is score, sometimes like it almost feels like it's pop music too. Like it's very 80s as well, so it almost doesn't feel like a score. And then I mean, then there's definitely times where there is definite score, but it's almost not noticeable, which in my mind means it's working. Like it's not necessarily distracting you. It's it's doing what it needs to do, which is support the narrative and the scenes that it's going on in. But yes, it's definitely a music heavy film, and I guess understandably so. I mean, the 80s was kind of wasn't the total beginning of it, but it's when it started to become really popular to put like just a bunch of songs in. And I guess that had to do with MTV and all that stuff. But yeah, 80s started to dish out tons of soundtracks with music, including Argento did too, with like Demons and Phenomena, and this is a great one.
Now, I am not hip to music or musical trends, but it seems to me, just like listening to these songs, it's not like movies from, say the 2000s where it's a lot of popular music on the soundtrack. Were these big hit songs, or were these songs that kind of became known as a result of being part of the Lost Boys?
I mean, I'm sure some of them were, but it's definitely, I think, it's always the movies, I think, are what really make those songs popular, right? Like, like Kokomo was a hit because it was in Cocktail. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or
and John Stamos in the music video, because that was the era of Full House. Don't forget.
And all the music and Footloose and all those 80s soundtracks. I think all those songs became hits because they were in the movies. It was a very give and take between the music and the movies in terms of the artists that were doing them, and then becoming the songs becoming popular because they're in the movies and stuff. It was, I can't think of the word, but it was fluid in terms of back and forth.
Well, I mean, like it's strange because a lot of the songs on the Lost Boys soundtrack, I don't hear outside the context of this movie, like Cry Little Sister, like, Good Time. They're really great songs, but it's not like you hear them on the radio all the time. In fact, I think I heard, it might have actually been Good Time. I heard it in a store or something at one point, I think within the last couple of months. And I had this very strange moment. Like, did I just wander into a movie? Because this is wrong.
And that is a banger song. I love that. I love that song.
Yeah. So AC, tell me about your first experience of seeing The Lost Boys.
Well, I mean, it was 87. So I was 1 year into college, and I think I saw it with some high school friends. I probably came back home and watched it with a group, because it was back in my hometown of Longmont, Colorado. And I remember, I mean, my biggest thing was like, Kiefer Sutherland is so friggin' cool. And oh my gosh, I want my hair now I just want my hair, period. But I so wanted to have the guts to have a super blonde peroxide mullet, and I never made it happen. And to my eternal chagrin.
I tried that probably a little more than a decade later when I got infatuated with James Marsters as Spike on Buffy. I tried to, bleach blonde my hair, bleach white, and it came out canary yellow.
Mm.
And there is photographic evidence somewhere out there.
Was that out of a box, or did you actually go to a salon?
Box. I had my
Yeah.
roommate do it. She tried her best. But yeah, so it's a very strange. Like, what was your reaction to seeing it? Were you? This is my question. I consider this a horror movie because it's got vampires in it, I guess, but it's not particularly scary. It's just, to use a word that you just used, cool.
Yeah.
The first time you saw it, did you think it was scary or did you just think it was cool?
I think there's some good kind of like suspense moments in it. Every time a vampire is getting killed, there's some pretty good build up to it and some drama surrounding it. You wonder, like our characters are at risk. But I think that it is more of a it's kind of it's a fun horror film in that it's scary in the right way. It's not something that you're looking over your shoulder going home or worried that somebody's going to show up at your door. It's just like, this is fun. I feel the excitement, the adrenaline. I like these characters on both sides of the good and evil spectrum. Like, I enjoy watching the evil characters. And I'm still rooting for the good guys. And I just feel like it really strikes a great balance.
It does, and it's funny in places, but it's not hokey. I mean, it's hard to believe that 10 years after this, Joel Schumacher was making Batman and Robin. Because that's just like complete Adam West Batman, nonsense. Whereas here, yeah, there are jokes and everything, but it's not laughing at the film. It's laughing at the situation, sort of the characters in the movie. You could say, yeah, this is sort of gallows humor. Although I did still kind of cringe at the death by stereo line. Wow. But yeah, Blake, how about you? What was your first experience with the Lost Boys, and what did you make of it when you first saw it?
I don't remember the first time I saw it. I think I definitely saw scenes from it on cable at my dad's house in the late 80s. Probably like when it first hit cable. I watching it this time, I was reminded of the fact we did this movie a few years ago on Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers. And I re-listened to some of that just to kind of refresh my memory of the things that we talked about on that show. But I was kind of reminded this time around that, like, I think I grew up terrified of Kiefer Sutherland from, both his character in Stand By Me and this movie, like when I think back, and then, I guess Young Guns is shortly after this, but I remember just like being really freaked out by him as a kid. And I think it's because, like I said, I don't remember watching the whole movie as a kid, but I do remember like the end, like when he's all vamped out and stuff. Like, I do have like very clear recollections of that stuff. And then my friends in high school were way into it. So then we ended up renting it and watching it a lot. And I remember my buddy Chuck would quote it all the time, but quote it wrong all the time. So as I watch the movies these days, when those lines come up, like, I always kind of chuckle because I think of, like, he would always say, like, worms, Michael, you're eating worms. Like, no, it's maggots. The line is maggots, not worms. And he would say, consider a survival guide. And that's not actually the line in the movie. So every time he would do these impressions of the characters because he loved the movie so much, but they were always wrong. And so nowadays I just kind of laugh at that stuff when I watch it.
Max, you haven't been invited yet.
One of those.
Yeah. Oh man, it is such a quotable movie. And I remember, I think my parents rented it when I was probably 10 years old, and we watched it together. And this is shortly after I'd been allowed to start watching horror movies with them. And I remember thinking, yeah, it was cool, but kind of scary because it's like a dark basement, even with the family kind of a movie. And there's some great atmosphere with this. I think for the first time, at least for me, it was kind of scary. But then after that, once I knew what to expect, like watching it as an adult, I more appreciate the artistry and I appreciate what this film is compared to if, God forbid, they tried to remake it today. I know they did a bunch of direct-to-video sequels which weren't that good, but I just keep thinking about the restraint. Like, there is one scene pretty much where there are vampires flying and fighting each other. That's at the climax, where Michael and David are kind of like flying up to the roof of the cabin and struggling. Doesn't look very good, especially in high definition, but it doesn't look terrible. It just looks a little bit dated. But there's tons of vampire flying action in this movie. It's all just done with POV camera, and it's very effective because you see people running, looking over their shoulder, looking up into the sky, and then there's the attack of the couple that is reading stolen comics in the car, and the one girl is really, really amused by Sad Sack. I mean, that's, even at 10 years old, I'm like, that's bullshit. Anyway, but when she gets taken, like, she's grabbing onto the car and her legs are being yanked up into the sky. It's kind of a chilling, just, it looks just so wrong, that it's wonderful. And yeah, I love the whole comics culture thing. You've got the Frog Brothers as sort of these watchdogs of vampires in Santa Carla. There's this whole culture of something is wrong with this town, but no one really wants to acknowledge it, or they're too like stoned or busy skateboarding or spiking up their hair to notice. All these missing and wanted kind of leaflets papering, like littering the town. It's just it's kind of eerie. Watching it now and picking up on things where, as when I was younger, I was just like, oh, where's the vampire stuff? And speaking of restraint, we don't get the real vamped out faces until way late in the movie.
Right.
There's something, classically vampires are very romantic creatures, and they have, particularly when it comes to like women, like the men hypnotize them, with those eyes. Like in the Bela Lugosi version, you'd have the eye highlight striking across the face to show the hypnosis going on. In this one, there is one of those scenes, but it doesn't draw attention to itself. It's when Michael and Star are walking along the pier, and they come across David and the gang on the motorcycle, and he's just kind of looking at her like, get on the bike. And she looks at him, and it's almost like an intimidation thing. Like, she's like the long-suffering girlfriend who's been caught like talking to another guy, but it's also just sort of an attraction because Kiefer Sutherland, again, that performance, he's just like, I know you're going to get on the bike. Just, come on, Star, let's go. You don't need those. You don't need any special effects or special sound effects or his eyes getting bright and hers going all saucer-eyed. It's just an attraction. And there's all these little details like that, these little tweaks to the vampire convention throughout the movie that I just adored.
Well, talking about the makeup, I mean, Greg Canham, 4-time Oscar winner, Greg Canham, what was fun watching you kind of talk about, like, my experience now versus my experience then. What's amazing is to, 35 years later, to be watching the opening credits and be like, oh my gosh, Greg Canham, because he got the Oscar for Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, which we're going to be talking about in a week or two. Yeah. And, Jeffrey Boehm, who did the screenplay for The Dead Zone, and Michael Chapman, who was Martin Scorsese's cinematographer for Raging Bull and Taxi Driver. And I'm just like going, holy mackerel, like the talent on this film is amazing. And I was like, Harvey Bernhard made his bones as the producer of The Omen. And Richard Donner, Richard Donner was supposed to originally direct this, and he was tied up with, I think, maybe The Goonies, but whatever he was tied up with, he wasn't available.
Lethal Weapon.
Okay, so he ended up producing this one. But again, just watching the opening credits 35 years later, just kind of having amassed more knowledge than I had when I was 17. I was just like, oh my gosh, like this was an amazing, it's no surprise that it turned out as well as it did.
Yeah.
I have one question for the panel, and I'm almost embarrassed to ask it. Do vampires have eyes in their butts?
I have to ask why you're asking this.
Because as much as I love the cinematography in this film with the POV shots of the vampires flying, which I just kind
Yeah.
of gushed over, there is one scene that is beautifully photographed, but it makes no sense. It's when David and the rest of the vampires are coming out for the final battle, coming up from their the sunken hotel that they've kind of taken up residence in this really cool bombed out looking cave. They fly up and out of the cave and up and around, but the entire point of view is
It's from
we're
behind
not.
them.
It's from behind them.
Yeah, it's true.
What were they flying backwards? Were they that stunned from having been attacked previously, or do they in fact have eyes in their butts?
I think they just like to fly backwards.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're
Thank
just
you.
showing off. You're just showing off.
That's right.
However, something that hit me this time, and I hadn't thought about this either, but like the duality of the Lost Boys. So you've got the Lost Boys, which in these children who have disappeared, right? But then there's also the J.M. Barrie Peter Pan Lost Boys, in that we have children who never grow up. And that hadn't clicked for me before. I think I'd always just thought about the literal, there are children missing in Santa Carla.
Yeah, I think most people would think the other thing, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's something that occurred to me when we did it, when we did it on Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers. I remember being like, yeah, there's kind of two meanings to this title with all the missing children, in addition to this not wanting to grow up Lost Boys Peter Pan thing.
And I wonder if that would have been more obvious if according to David Wilt, they'd gone in the original direction of having it be more about like a Goonies centric, if these vampires were in fact kids. If it would have been more nail on the head. But yeah, I like that. I also like the whole idea of family, which is something that I hadn't really picked up on until watching it tonight, because as I grow older and I watch these horror movies, I'm finding I'm paying more attention to what's going on with the adults, whether or not it's a movie about them, like the original Hellraiser, which I did watch this week, or in the case of the Lost Boys. When I'm a kid, I only care about hanging out in the comic shop with the Frog Brothers, or I want to be Michael's best friend and tell him to stay away from those ruffians so he can go be with Star. I use the word ruffians. I am, in fact, 90 years old. But as an adult, I'm thinking, man, Diane Wiest is so good in this movie. And I really wanted her to end up with Edward Herrmann's character, this nerdy video store manager who just, he's keeping the punks out of his store. He's kind of a no-nonsense sort of guy, but he also seems very sweet. Also turns out to be the king of the vampires. And what I loved was at the end of the film, when he reveals his true self and he gives, her the choice. She's like, I've been trying to find, we need basically a mother's influence, a woman's touch in this little vampire coven I have going on. So I want to join your boys and my boys, and I'm going to break your kid's neck if you don't join me. He reaches out his hand, and you see her. It's almost like the wind of this decision is gusting in her face, and she reaches out to take his hand. She's willing to sacrifice herself in order to, save her children, even if that means sort of damning all of them together. It's a powerful and very sweet kind of message, which I didn't pick up on until just this week.
Yeah, I mean, basically the whole movie's about family, right? I mean, we have her family, and then we have the family of the Lost Boys. And I mean, the only two female characters in the movie are both kind of like motherly figures. Star is kind of the motherly figure for Laddie, and then you have Diane Wiest's character is also the mother, obviously, of the boys and stuff. It's an interesting film in that way. And Michael is kind of stuck in this weird place because basically they're, clearly she's like newly divorced. And if I recall correctly, I read the novelization a long time ago, and I remember it's much more like, there's a lot more stuff with Michael in that he's kind of he's trying to find an identity now, because now that his dad's gone, is he now the head of the family? Is he now like the man of the family? They move to this new place. I mean, we see him get a new jacket in this scene. It's like he's trying to fit in, figure out what his what his kind of his deal is now that they're in this new place and in a new environment, and he, starts to flock to this other group of guys that are clearly lost, no pun intended, in their own way. And so, I mean, it's really interesting from all those standpoints. One thing that I kind of like about it is now, so many years later, 3 decades or so later, we're now very much been bombarded with like the tortured vampire, the one who's been a vampire and they don't want to be a vampire anymore. And it's kind of refreshing that, the gang of guys here, they just seem to love it. It's like, they're not tortured by it at all. It's like a superpower, and they're way into it. And we weren't getting, aside from, I don't know, Martin, which is a totally different kind of movie, and it, begs the question: is he a vampire? Is he not a vampire? Yada yada. Like, this is, at least for me, recent memory, like the first incarnation of like young teenage vampires, like in a movie. I mean, now we've got like Twilight and all those things, and Vampire Academy, and Vampire Diaries and all those things. But kind of Lost Boys is as far as I know, I'm sure there's people that might be watching that would be like, no, there's this and there's that.
I'll be one of those guys.
Okay, well, no. For me, at least this is the first one I can think of that involves.
Well, no, I was going to say it's a movie that kind of reminds me of The Lost Boys. It came out a year or two earlier. Was Fright Night. Now that's not really about teenage vampires, only because they didn't get a chance to fully turn. But you look at Evil Ed, who did turn and attempting to turn Amy, right?
Yeah,
but,
Amanda Bierce is
right, but that's another case. And Blake, I think you brought up something interesting here. Like Jerry Dandridge is an older, guy. He's probably like looks to be in his 30s, but he's much older than that, obviously. But he's like a swinging vampire bachelor. He's like, this is great. I just move into the neighborhood. Yeah, there's some curious kids next door, but I can take care of them. But, unbeknownst to him, they've got Peter Vincent on their side. Yeah. But yeah, there is something cool about a joyous, vampire. And the Lost Boys, David and his gang, there is that bit where they're trying to turn Michael, and it's the beach party, and Michael refuses to, join in the attack of like killing these innocent bonfire ravers. And David's like, you're going to live forever. You're never going to die. You're going to be invincible, but you must feed. But it's in so many vampire movies lately, or the last recent decades, we see that kind of moral quandary of the hunger or the pangs, or like you said, this kind of tortured soul thing. I don't get the feeling that David and his friends are eating every night. They just seem to kind of like go out and, whenever the mood strikes them. So it's not like part of the curse. I don't know how long they've been around.
Well, there's a lot of missing children, so they seem to be feeding a lot more than
they are teenagers after all. Teenagers eat a lot.
Well, here's my question, and it just occurred to me: are they the only ones? Are they the only vampires in Santa Carla? Could there have been other like vampires that weren't? Did Max have other children, so to speak?
Well, Grandpa, that's what he says. It's like, that's the one thing I hate about this place is all the damn vampires.
Yeah, I would imagine he's not, when he says all the vampires, he's not talking about like 5 people.
He's been dealing with this for a long time.
True. I did like at the end when David transforms, he doesn't do the whole, and this is sort of like going back to the Fright Night thing, because when Evil Ed gets staked, he reverts from the wolf monster back to his, old self.
Yeah.
In this one, David doesn't only change, like all of his stubble and crazy hair goes away. It's like babyface Kiefer Sutherland.
That always, even when I saw it the first time, like, wait, what? Wait, like he's clean shaven now? Is that part of vampirism? Is you get your 5 o'clock shadow?
That's part of the parental warnings. Don't hang out with those vampires. You're gonna start drinking, and your hair's gonna get all funny. And it's like a PSA wrapped up in a vampire movie.
What's funny, Blake, is that every time somebody quotes from this movie now, I'm going to be imagining how your friend misquoted
it. Something I noticed. You mentioned the opening credits, AC. Something I noticed. and I have a theory as to why this is. It's starring in alphabetical order. Could this have been because there were so many like young stars and potentially young egos that they're like, okay, who's going to get top billing? The two Coreys or Kiefer Sutherland?
Well, also, I think Diane Wiest had just won a friggin' Oscar. And it's like, we're not going to give her top billing. And it's like, well, no, because we're doing it in alphabetical order. So that's why you're last.
Yeah, no, it's Diane Wiest, it's not called The Lost Boys' friend's mom.
Nope.
It's,
Yeah.
it's The Lost Boys.
But I mean, she understandably had some clout at that point. And I remember thinking that, I was like going, gosh, when you win your Oscar, what's the first thing you do? You go and do a vampire movie, obviously. And I don't know where this was in her, like if she'd already shot the film, was shooting the film when she won for Hannah and Her Sisters. But yeah, I remember thinking, wow, that's some impressive, casting. And Edward Herrmann, I've known him for years. I mean, he was a staple in the 70s, like TV movies and the like.
I only knew him from Gilmore Girls, a show that he appeared on in the early 2000s. He was playing like the grandfather of the show. Yeah. So yeah, again, it's always shocking to me seeing him in this movie because he's all like young and slim. He has dark hair.
Well, it's funny. He's older in this movie to me because I first saw him. He did a biography of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. He played Franklin Roosevelt, and I think he may have won an Emmy or was at least nominated. So I remember seeing him very young, and then he's kind of, older here. So I pulled up his IMDb page earlier and I was like, oh, you did not look so great when you passed away. Like he did not age well.
Well, but I'm glad you brought up Edward Herrmann and we talked about Diane Wiest, because even though these are serious actors, not to say that the other folks are not serious, but let's be honest, it was the mid 80s. It was a movie targeted at, teenagers and teen culture. So you're not necessarily going after, great thespians or giving them meaty roles. I mean, the adults had actual parts in this movie and they played them very well. I mentioned it before. I was really wrapped up in what was going on with them as much as what was happening with the youth.
Yeah.
And was this Jason Patric? Was this one of his early roles or was this his first thing? Because this is the first thing I remember him seeing.
I think Solar Babies was before this. And I think maybe he had done something for television, but he was still fairly new, I think, in terms of film and television. I know that was kind of the thing, was like he was really serious and he didn't want to do it. And Joel Schumacher had to really kind of convince him to do it because he didn't want to do like a schlocky horror movie, because he was thought of himself as a, very serious actor. And I didn't know this until like 2 years ago when somebody posted on social media that, and of course the name of the actor is escaping me, but that he's the son of the priest from The Omen.
Right.
Yeah. Which I didn't know. I was like, how did I not know that? Because my mind is
Miller. Yeah. He's the son of Jason Miller's son.
Because my mind is a steel trap for stupid trivia like that. But I was like, how did I not know that one?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think because his father, was from the theater, and but yes, this was his second feature. Solar Baby, you were right. Solar Baby was his first film, and then this was his second one. He'd done one TV movie prior to this. But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, he does come off as the most serious of the young actors. Like,
he's brooding as hell. Yeah,
this guy is like, I'm gonna be doing some important work here.
He was brandoing it up. I mean, like, he's got two modes in this movie. He's got like, hey, yeah, whatever, mom, I can stay home and take care of the kid. Or he's like got this really weird when he yells. He was in a movie a couple years after this called The Beast, which was a drama about like Afghanistan. It was a really good movie, but I noticed something even when I was 12. When he yells, it's almost like his yell is going through puberty. Like in this movie, he's like, "You want to face me, David?" I'm like, what?
Well, it's kind of like Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise can't yell at all. Like every time it's like, it all just goes up into his, that's why he has to do the Tom Cruise thing. when he has to just be super cool about it, because every time he like screams in anger or frustration, it's just like, oh, Tom, oh, Tommy.
He's not a screamer. He's a doer. He's a man of action.
That's right.
I don't got time to scream, to paraphrase.
On his planet, they don't scream.
Wow, that's not necessarily Z News. Anyway, we have some comments, so I'd like to pull over.
Hooray.
Yes, we have a cavalcade of comments. Let's see. In the film, one of the Frog Brothers tells Sam suspect that ghouls and werewolves are in the Santa Carla City Hall, and 2 years before appearing in the movie, the late Corey Haim appeared in the werewolf movie Silver Bullet. Yes. Could this be a Silver Bullet Lost Boys cinematic universe?
Could be.
The world may never know.
One of my favorite movies of all time.
One I gotta revisit, maybe in the anniversary. Was that 86?
5, I think.
85. Ooh, then we're even closer. We're gonna do
same
that
year as Teen Wolf. It was a hell of a year for werewolf movies.
Okay, Werewolf 1985. We're talking about those in a couple of years. The Gate stars Stephen Dorff, who appeared in the vampire movie Blade. Yes, drawing all the connections tonight, David. The movie is kind of like a vampire version of Jaws. During the first half of the movie, we only see the vampire kills from the vampire POV shots. That's true. Like when we do see the beach massacre, that's the first one where it gets like really gory. I did like the one where Kiefer Sutherland like bites into that one bald-headed guy, as if almost like he's like in Teen Wolf when Michael J. Fox bites into the beer. He just like goes for the top of it, right with the fangs.
I just kind of think of it this time around that it's kind of like a vampire version of Karate Kid. Like the single mom packs up the kids, goes to find a better life, beach.
Yep.
A lot of stuff going on the beach.
It's all there, really.
Yeah. It's
the exciting, climax and the hugging of Mr. Miyagi. Oh wait, that was just that one.
Was it Sweep the Neck? Let's see. If you guys ever see Bordello of Blood, which was a spinoff from HBO horror anthology series Tales from the Crypt, it also stars Chris Sarandon, who appeared in the classic vampire movie Fright Night. Both he and Corey Feldman reversed the roles they played. Yes. All right. Yeah, Chris Sarandon. I was thrilled to meet him and get my Fright Night poster signed a few years ago at a convention until I actually met him. But that's neither here or there.
Was he not a nice guy to you?
There's a picture of me with him and Chad, who we're going to meet at some point this month, they see. I'll have to dig that picture up. It looked like he was angry at being alive. Not Chad, but Fright Night is like a vampire version of Rear Window. Yes, very much so.
True enough.
All right, look, before I understand Tumbad, we are going to talk about Tumbad later this month is our exploration into Indian cinema. We're going to do a horror movie. We're going to kick off this new series I'm doing. And yes, Tumbad is on. That's the one we're talking about. Jason Miller was in The Exorcist. He was also the name of a childhood friend, which always freaked me out because I thought, my friend's in The Exorcist? No. All right, so those are some comments. What else do we want to talk about in regard to the Lost Boys that we haven't? We've talked about the music. We've talked about the hair, the stars.
We haven't talked about Alex Winter.
what was one of his two lines? I don't know.
Well, I know, but I remember being a big fan of Alex Winter. Not before Bill and Ted. I mean, he also has a fun little movie called Freaked, where
I've heard of that. I've never seen it
later though. That's in the 90s.
Oh no, it is later, but it's like like Alex Winter, I think is a national treasure, underappreciated, and I believe this was his first film. So much so that he's billed as Alexander Winter in the credits.
I think he was fresh out of like NYU film school when he did that, right? So,
yeah, I heard actually a lot of his lines got cut from this movie. And he wrote a blog post about it called "The Winter of My Discontent." Sorry, that is not true. It's just me making a terrible joke.
I want that to be true.
Well, we just lost a viewer, so that's.
I mean, I also I had the poster of the Lost Boys, the vampire gang, on my door for far too long, and I just remember like Alex Winter also looking like he just did not fit in. Like he was the least tough and brooding of the bunch. Like he had his curly hair, and he was just kind of like this weirdo on the corner. And I just remember thinking, oh, like you got these gorgeous men like Kiefer Sutherland and Billy Wirth, and then you got Alex Winter just kind of poking him from the side.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because Warner Brothers put out The Lost Boys on 4K, and I have a copy of it right here. I like the idea of this artwork because it's the train bridge hanging scene, and the Lost Boys, I don't know if you can see it, but it's like part of the ironwork. It's kind of a neat concept.
Yeah.
But when you have as perfect a movie poster as the original Lost Boys poster, why go with anything else?
Because I don't know, because that's the trend these days, is to have the fan art.
Especially because that cover of that 4K makes it look like a musical for some reason.
Oh my God, it looks like
Lost Boys.
It looks like the upside down Newsies. Look at that.
Now, I that said, I would not mind that T-shirt. Because that's kind of a fun, it's a callback, but it's not the iconic poster art.
Right. It's like a Fright Rags kind of design. Like you wear that at a convention, like, oh my God, I love that movie. That's a cool take on it.
And what's interesting is that even though like the original poster art is a bunch of friggin' faces, which is what we learned to hate, come the 90s and 2000s, it's done well, and it's done in a way that still evokes the spirit of the movie.
It's done well, and it also looks like it. I haven't really looked at it close enough to tell if it's artwork or a photograph that's been enhanced.
Right.
Because it does have like almost this, not quite a photo, almost painterly quality to it. But when you look at what's going on in that poster, you've got Michael looking out and away, like kind of up off in the distance. He's got his sunglasses on. And then behind him, you've got the Lost Boys, but you got Kiefer Sutherland staring right out at you. Like this clown isn't paying attention to what's going on, but we know what's going on. He's making a connection with the audience with those hypnotic eyes.
Well, and this movie, what's kind of amazing is like that this movie and Near Dark are both celebrating their 35th anniversary. And I love how both of those films are unconventional vampire tales that became classics, like in their own time. Like people which just went, this is my vampire movie.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that we're stuck in this weird period now, where everything new is new, frankly, and I'm looking for some innovation. I do like the big house siege at the end, where they kind of live up to an earlier line where every vampire goes out differently. Some implode, some explode, but all will try and take you with them. Like when the one guy gets plunged into the bathtub full of holy water, I like when they break the little convention of like garlic doesn't work. So it's like, how about garlic and holy water? Every pipe in the house explodes with this purple brown vampire blood. I don't think there was that much fluid in this guy's body. And there's also like little hurricanes popping up. There's wind and everywhere. And like, what is going on there? And then the other guy, the death by stereo guy, blows up because of the power of rock or something. And then you got David just getting impaled by these ram horns or whatever, and kind of smoking and dying and like rocking back and forth and crying. It's just, I don't know what's going on with this movie, but I love it.
And he glows.
That's true. That's very true. Oh, I forgot to mention, and I actually, my wife came in while I was watching this, and I paused the movie. She caught me as I was about to pause it, and I paused it and I rewound it. Like, honey, you've got to see this. It's the scene. It is one of the coolest reveal tells I think I've ever seen in a movie, and I didn't notice it until now. It's when Max is coming back. He's just found David, and he does the whole thing where he kind of turns his head and we see it's babyface Kiefer Sutherland, and then he walks back towards the family. He takes off his glasses, and then the next shot is he's in profile and he looks up, and you notice that right next to him is this giant stuffed saber-toothed tiger that grandpa had stuffed or whatever, taxidermied, and he's got these giant, like the huge fangs jutting out. So you see like the man who is actually the secret monster, but he hasn't revealed himself yet, and this giant creature with these huge, teeth. I'm like, that has to have been intentional. If it's not, it's one of the luckiest happy accents in cinema.
And then he turns into John Lithgow with fangs, which is
I thought it's like John Lithgow merged with Michael Ironside. It's the weirdest thing. I love that hair.
Well, I mean, I think it's just worth commenting. Like, this is the movie that Kiefer Sutherland became a star. Like he'd done a few things, but like this just launched him. People were like, okay, this guy, he's not Donald Sutherland's little kid. He's his own actor.
Although it's strange, the bit where he's in the up in the rafters where he says, "You are a killer." That face, that is straight up his dad. Like, he looks like Donald Sutherland in that moment. But it's all, I think, great. Well, not all great performances, because this is definitely a case of like the two Coreys. Like, they're popular. They're on Teen Beat magazine and everything. We got to put them in a movie together. I don't know. I think they had better chemistry and License to Drive, strangely enough.
Yeah, Corey Haim. Go ahead. So go, Jake.
I was just going to say, people always say like that this is a two Coreys movie, and I never really looked at it that way. I mean, like, yes, they're both in it, but neither one of them is the lead character. So, I mean, Max, a little bit, but I saw it, and when I look back at the dynasty that is the two Coreys, like, I never really think of this as a two Coreys movie, even though they are obviously both in it.
True. And I guess maybe it is such a stuffed cast. I just realized for the first time, I don't know where I'd been for 35 years, that Corey Feldman was essentially doing Rambo. I know he's dressed up in camo and everything, but like, I'm like, what are you doing with your voice? He's like, truth, justice, and the American way. I'm like, oh, I get it. You're PTSD from the Vietnam War of vampirism, I guess.
Well, and then that's kind of what Corey Feldman started doing for the rest of his career, was like being this kind of like weird tough guy who's like, you're not a tough guy at all.
Well, he was in his Michael Jackson phase forever.
Yes, he was.
And then there was Corey's Angels. Another just terrible celebrity meeting experience. Sorry. Anyway, we're not here to revisit my trauma. Although I will say, if you're going to pay like $50 for an autograph or whatever it was, you should write whatever I want you to write. And if you refuse to sign it unless you personalize it, I feel like that's a trap. And I got into that trap. And he ruined.
On a positive note, I once met Billy Wirth, and he was awesome.
I can imagine that. Yes.
Yep.
I was in California. It was like my first trip out to California for the first time by myself to do Scored to Death stuff. And I went the same weekend as Monsterpalooza. And I stayed in a hotel that was near it, but you had to walk quite a ways, like half a mile or something. And I was about to walk, and this guy comes up and he's like, "Are you going to the convention?" I said, "Yeah, but I'm just walking." He's like, "Oh, we can walk." He's like, "Can I walk with you?" And it turned out it was Billy Wirth, and we just like walked and shot the shit for like 20 minutes as we walked to Monsterpalooza together.
Wow.
And then he's like, if you come by my table later. So like Sunday I walked by, and he's like, "Blake," and gave me like a big hug. It was really, so he was awesome. Awesome. He's a positive experience.
Corey Haim, nice fella. Kind of quiet, but it's nice, because I know the Lost Boys, they did the Horror Hound. There's like a big convention a number of years ago for one of the anniversaries, probably 2017, I imagine. But I remember, I think I was at that Horror Hound and seeing people just like with their Lost Boys posters, because they had a whole bunch of people show up for that, and including, I think, G. Tom Mack doing, like, he was performing Cry Little Sister like in the lobby or something after hours, kind of holding court. But it was just cool to see like all these classic Lost Boys posters with all the ink of the signatures, and people are just like so happy to see everybody there, because this movie, it's not only cool, but I think it came out when a lot of us were younger, at a sort of formative genre movie for a lot of folks, and it just kind of makes people happy, which is odd to say for a horror movie,
Yeah. What do you guys make of all like the references to the Doors in this movie? Or like there's a Doors cover, and because it's also like pre the movie The Doors, so the Doors at this point weren't that big. Other than that, I think Billy Idol might have covered L.A. Woman around the sometime in the 80s. So I always wondered, like, is it that Joel Schumacher was just a big Doors fan? I've always thought of the Doors as being very much a teenage band. Like it's the kind of like it's a band you get into when you're a teenager and then you kind of grow out of it. And I was like, maybe like they never grow out of it because they're teenagers eternally. Or is it a hint that they've just been around a long time and they, and they became vampires in the 60s and they're still hanging on to their youth.
I like that. This is another thing I noticed for the first time was that bit in, I think it was the wine drinking scene where Michael drinks the blood from this really cool ornate wine bottle. If someone hasn't made one of these props for a convention to sell, they should, because it's really neat. But yeah, he kind of trips out and everything gets all dreamy. But there is a bit where Jason Patric's face kind of dissolves into the Jim Morrison poster that's hanging on the background. And I don't know if Joel Schumacher was a big fan of the Doors, but I know Oliver Stone was. So I wonder, would we have Val Kilmer as Jim Morrison in the Doors if we didn't have the Lost Boys? Timeline lines up.
The world may never know.
I kind of thought it was hilarious this time around where like Michael like gives a bunch of crap to Star, and she's like, I'm honestly like, she told you it was blood. She told you not to drink it. Yeah, she told you what was in the bottle. You can't be mad at her for this.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, right, blood. Love Jason Patric. Anyway, I have loved this conversation. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Daisy.
I don't know that we can properly celebrate this 35th anniversary without making mention of Timmy Capello as our oily saxophone player on the beach, because that was absolutely I was like, what is this? What is happening right now? Who is this like muscle bound guy who's like, cranking out the tunes here? And apparently, I mean, I didn't even know. I thought he had been hired to lip sync, but apparently he's actually a musician and has performed with like Tina Turner and like a bunch of like huge, like he's like a main guy.
I saw him in concert with Tina Turner when I was in the 90s. My parents took me to go see Tina Turner. He was the saxophone player.
Wow. That's awesome. Was he wearing a shirt?
Not a lot.
Why would you? Jeez.
It's like if he was, my memory is it might have been like one of those like Hulk Hogan, like tank tops that's already all ripped up and ready to be torn off his body at any moment.
I had forgotten how much he was in that scene. I thought my memory was just like, oh, it's the one shot of the guy with the shirtless and he's got the saxophone. But no, that song goes on forever because it's the background of Star and Michael's flirtation. The thing that struck me is that like the way he's holding that saxophone, he's holding it as if he was holding like a foam baseball bat. Like that's how ripped this guy is.
Crush this thing.
Oh, so good. I believe it was one of the Lost Boys sequels. I don't know if it was actually him or if they just got someone to bring back that character, because they kind of showed Santa Carla in, 2013 or whenever it was. And it was just like all the shots of the weirdos on the street. And it was like a really obese guy with no shirt, like playing the saxophone. I think he had the same pants or something.
Well, he was just in the finale of the season of the show, Reservation Dogs.
Really?
There's like a discussion about the Lost Boys, and at the end, the show ends with like him on the beach playing saxophone, singing.
He's still ripped, isn't he? He's still all ripped up.
He just looks like an old version of him,
Wow. Man. So yeah, the film continues to have resonance. That's the lesson to take away from today. Well, thank you guys for talking about the Lost Boys. I didn't know exactly how much there would be to discuss, but there has been a lot. And I'd forgotten how much I love this movie, and I don't know why I haven't watched it more often. It does fill me kind of with this weird joy, not just of nostalgia, but I think, as you pointed out, AC, it's just nice to see a vampire movie where not everybody is miserable all the time. But so speaking of movies and great things ahead.
Miserable.
Whoa, no. You're getting to it might not feel like it, Blake, because you're in the trenches, but you're in the process of living the dream. You are turning Scored to Death, the two volumes, 2 books. You're translating that to a documentary in some form, and you have a Kickstarter going. Tell us about it, and how do folks get involved?
Well, that's correct. I'm running a Kickstarter. I feel bad asking for money when we're raising money for a very great cause here. So after you've contributed to the charity in which we're speaking for today, if you have any left over, think about going over to Kickstarter. Yeah, I'm trying to turn the books into a documentary. More than it being based on the books, I think of it as kind of just like a continuation of, in that I don't want to just do an abridged version of the books. What I want to do is explore this topic in a way that I couldn't do with the books. And so far, we've shot 5 interviews so far, and on my social media at Scored to Death on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, I've been putting up kind of little sneak peeks of some of the footage that we've already shot. And we're trying to raise money so that we can keep on going, basically. And I think the thing that's most exciting about it, aside from the movie and the fact that we have already some great composers lined up, and some have already been interviewed, like Harry Manfredini and Charles Bernstein and Charlie Clouser and Richard Band and Holly Amber Church. John Massari is also involved. Alan Howarth is also involved. Christopher Young. But what I'm doing in conjunction with this to help raise money for the film is I'm also producing a compilation record of horror movie themes, all newly recorded covers by a great lineup of artists and composers. Alan Howarth, the Blair Brothers, the band Voyager, the band Anima Morte, Steve Moore from the band Zombie, Wojciech Golchevsky, Holly Amber Church is also doing one. Apologize if I'm missing anybody. Richard Christie, famous, not just for the Howard Stern show, but famed drummer, heavy metal drummer. They're all lending their talents for free, recording new versions of these songs because they believe in the project and they want to see it get done. And so you can get a limited edition vinyl or CD of this Scored to Death record or album exclusively on the Kickstarter to try to raise money for the film. So we're doing a lot of really fun stuff. And we've gotten a slow start, and but we're still going. We're going to fight till the end, and hopefully we can make this happen.
Well, that's excellent. I'm going to have I don't think it's there yet, but I'm going to put a link to the Kickstarter down below so folks can participate as they like. Now, I want to ask, because some of the composers you mentioned, I think you said that you've done interviews for, you have interviews lined up with, are people you've talked to for Scored to Death 1 and probably 2, right? So
yeah.
Have you talked to anybody that you talked to already for one of the books in this new segment? Have you had those conversations yet?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I've interviewed 5 people, and they've all been in the book.
Okay, well that's what I was asking. So, without giving anything away, are they like different? Are they like kind of catching up with them from where they were before? Are you learning like new stuff about where their careers have gone in the last few years?
Well, it's the movie. What I'm trying to do with the movie isn't that. It's more trying to understand how music works in a horror movie, and by using the examples of the scores they've already done. The books were much more about their process, biographical stories about working with the directors, and some of that's in here too, but the goal is to kind of explore what I wasn't able to do with the book. Well, like on the written page, you can't really sit down with them at the keyboard or at the computer and go over the tracks and have them kind of explain how they did it and why they did it and why it works and kind of why music in horror movies is unique compared to other genres. So
I
that's
think
kind of the
that's
goal.
great. Yeah, it sounds like a natural evolution from one project to the next. You know, why
Yeah.
one
And
medium is sort of required to get a certain point across, so you can't get like in the written word.
yeah, I mean, it seemed kind of pointless to just do like an hour and a half version of 30 interviews that I've already done, which were out. Like the interview I did for Scored to Death 2 with Charlie Clouser was like 4.5 hours long. So to try to do like an hour and a half movie where we just kind of tread over that stuff. And we do get into some of that stuff in the book, the stuff what I'm trying to do, but it's so much easier to, I think, to dive into those things like with them, with the being able to show the clips of the movies or listen to the score, have them play stuff. It's much more about that than what I explored in the book. What was great about the book, and I've always wanted to do it as a documentary, and I wanted to do it after I did the first book, but I'm kind of glad I waited because what I never knew was going to happen when I did the first book was that I was going to form such great relationships and friendships with so many of these people. Which then extended over into the second book. So doing it now just feels like the right time because one, you know, I know them both as interviewing them, but also like spending time with them and being friendly with them. But also having now gained the experience of doing both books. Like I think I'm in a better place to do it now than I would have been had I done it in like 2016 when the first book came out. So I'm really excited about it. I hope other people are too, or at least can get excited about it. Like I said, you can follow me on social media at Scored to Death, and I've been posting a couple videos. Like we have a cool video of Charlie Clouser at his computer, kind of explaining the Hello Zep cue from Saw. I just put up a kind of a montage of the composers talking about Bernard Herrmann and the score for Psycho. And that kind of stuff. So, you know, I'm really pleased with the stuff that we've already shot, but there's still so much more to shoot. And there's even people like I would love to ask to do it, but I was hoping to have a budget and have this be an actual movie before I start approaching everybody. I kind of fell back on all my friends and asked them all to do it first so that I could have videos and stuff to show for the Kickstarter campaign. But I would love to interview people that I didn't get a chance to interview for the book, like Marco Bacciami, who I wanted to interview for the second book, and we tried to make it work for like a year and a half, and then finally I just said like, look, I got to hand in the manuscript. I can't wait any longer. So
when you finally do make that happen, you can release your third book, which is My Dinner with Marco.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on getting this far. And yeah, I'm excited to see the doc when it all comes together, not if, because you're going to cross that finish line, sir. So yeah, if you're out there, you're interested, go check the link down below, and also be sure and check out the link for, do you refer to it as WRAP? It's WRRAP. It's the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project.
Right.
So yeah, definitely check that out and support as you're able. And, you know, join us back here next week when we're going to be talking on Friday. That's October 14th. Let me see if I can actually pull this up artfully.
Look at that.
Ooh.
Hey, look.
Professional.
Yeah, well, almost, because I got to get this thing off there so people actually see the date. Yeah, Friday, October 14th, we're going to be talking about Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, the classic horror comedy, also from 1987. So yeah, it's going to be very exciting. Yes,
hell of a year.
Amazing. So yeah, let me take that off there so I can get our pretty mugs back on the screen.
I didn't know you could take that logo away. You're a genius.
No, that's StreamYard. I just click a button. I'll show you all my tricks later.
But you did well.
Yeah, well, thank you. But yeah, I think that'll bring us to a conclusion for this 35th anniversary of The Lost Boys. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you out there for watching. If you enjoyed this live stream, join us back here every Friday in October, 7:30 p.m. Central for more Friday Night Frights. Also, we'll be doing updates on Aaron's Scare-a-Thon adventures, catching up with what we're watching. And yeah, like and subscribe to all of our stuff. All the descriptions are down below. We'll have loaded panels, not panels members who are loaded, but full panels of more people hanging out. But I have enjoyed this little intimate gathering with you fine folks tonight. And we'll see you next week. Do we have a sign off for Scare-a-Thon, Aaron?
I think we'll have to work on it, but for now, let's say thanks for sharing the scare.
Yes, thank you for sharing the scare. And with that, we will say good night. Let's try that again. Good night.